EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Getting my days mixed up here this morning. Johnny Mack, how you doing on this Wednesday morning? A lot of news in the NFL world yesterday, Johnny Mack, including some on our Philadelphia Eagles. How you doing on this Wednesday, John?
Doing well. Hope everybody's good in Florida. We just had a listener who's listening to us. You should be battening down the hatches, though. I appreciate the loyalty, but everybody stay safe down there. And back to practice today. So locally, that's a big thing. Back after the bye week.
Yep, back after the bye. I do want to give a shout out. By the way, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring the show today, the full 2-hour show sponsored by BetUS. So big thanks to them. Jay, perfect. I got to give it. John, that's worthy of a shout out right here. Now, Jay, I'll say this to you. Please be safe and make sure everything is handled on your end the best you can. But this is dedication right here. Jay Perfect checks in on YouTube, everybody, and says, I'm in Tampa, Florida. Hurricane Milton is supposed to destroy us, but before it does, I got to listen to Birds 365. Imagine how dedicated and loyal of a fan I am. That might be worthy of a JAKIB sweatshirt giveaway, John. I might have to send Jay, if he makes it through, a little JAKIB sweatshirt. Jay, thanks for being here, brother. We appreciate that support, and hopefully everybody in Florida, John. I told you yesterday, our third most popular listening base is in Florida in terms of cities, so or states, actually. So we have Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and then Florida's number 3. So appreciate all of you guys for checking in. And Florida, anybody in Florida out there, stay safe. I know our buddy Bob Brown's down there as well. Daz, I know you're down there. So stay safe, all of our Florida people. Johnny Mack, Devin White cut yesterday. Your reaction?
Yeah, well, you should have known it was coming, but yeah, it didn't work out. It was a shot in the dark. It was a dart throw. I think, I put on Twitter, this is one of the most strangest situations where the perception never matched the reality because of, the things we've talked about from day one when they made this signing, the pedigree, being a number 5 overall pick, the constant belief that everyone stays in that stasis and he's still that type of prospect or that type of player. He was never that type of player. He had the rare 3-game run to the Super Bowl, and that was basically it in Tampa Bay. He was a bad football player. The rest of the time he was in Tampa Bay. They took it as far as they took it. The Eagles paid him $3.5 million guaranteed. Even that, it was when they signed him, if you remember, it was portrayed as $7.5 million. So I think people were thrown off by that as well. It's just a bunch of incentives he was never going to reach to make it look better for him. And it was, if the dart throw works, great. If it doesn't, you move on. And probably took him too long to move on, to be honest. And it's, I'll tell you what, though, good guy, tremendous, handled it well, handled it in a classy fashion, at least in front of the cameras. Now, behind the scenes, the personal reasons, not going back to Tampa, obviously, he just didn't want to be involved at that point. Even if you go back to week 1, they didn't take him to Brazil because it was evident he was not going to be a part of this thing. They came up with a tweaked ankle, which magically went away. Then it was a healthy scratch. And then the personal reasons. Never played a snap for the Philadelphia Eagles. And
never even dressed.
Never dressed. Once he lost the job, basically the Eagles didn't want to hand the middle linebacker job to Nakobe Dean again. That's basically what happened here. They were hoping he would win it. He did win it. And once Vic Fangio became comfortable with Zach Vaughn at the other position, which was a bit of a surprise, to be honest, that was the bigger surprise to me. Then there was just no role because then you have to play special teams. And Ben Van Sumer is probably their best special teams player. Oren Burks has been a long time good special teams player in this league and a good backup linebacker. And obviously you have the rookie Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And he just didn't have a role. And finally, we can turn the page.
John, there's a couple questions I have from it. One is now what happens with the linebacking core? Who steps up? Will somebody step up? Nakobe Dean hasn't been great, so we'll get to that. But they never even gave the guy a chance. I mean, if what if this guy can play? Are we sure he can't play? They never even gave him a shot. John,
He had the vast majority of first team reps for at least through the first 2 weeks of training camp.
Yeah.
And then it started. They gave him plenty of opportunity behind the scenes.
Yeah, but that's different than gameplay. I mean,
well, that's where you win and lose jobs, though.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, when you have marginal linebackers at best, you would think they would at least give the guy the first rounder a chance to get on the field at least.
He's not good. I don't know. I don't like to disrespect players. I don't like to because they're all given effort. But this pedigree thing is a problem with fans around the NFL, and I'm not picking on Eagles fans. He isn't good because he was the number 5 pick. He literally never had one mediocre season in Tampa Bay if you look at the film. And then they'll come back, well, he was an all-pro. Well, my buddy Rob Monty, and I've said this to him, you got to take some of those votes away from those writers who are looking at box scores and seeing a black and white figure of 9 sacks and saying this guy's an all-pro because he's got 9 sacks. He was never consistent. He was always every single year near the bottom of the linebackers in this league who played when it came to the film work. And you can look at PFF, you can look at True Media, you can look at Next Gen Stats. He was not a good football player. It happens all the time. It's a disaster when you miss that badly on a number 5 overall pick. But that's what happened. And if he were a 7th round pick, he would have been out of this league
quick
3 years ago.
Yeah.
So the reason they didn't give him a chance, they have more confidence in Ben Van Sumeren and Warren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. as a rookie. That's where the organization is. That's why he's not getting a chance. If they thought he was better, he'd be here. If they thought he was better, he'd be dressed. They were more comfortable. Let's face it, with Nakobe's injury history coming off last year, and Zach Baughn's status as an emerging player who hasn't really played the position of weak side linebacker, they could have used a veteran presence, and they didn't want it because they had more confidence that Ben Van Sumeren or Jeremiah Trotter could step in. Now, I think those players, especially Ben, is and maybe Trot down the road, but he's more unproven. But I think people don't understand how much he's progressed behind the scenes. Again, that's where you win and lose jobs. So, and I've been saying it since practically day one that the linebackers are all interchangeable. Like I would have as much confidence Nakobe and Devin is.
You have been saying that, that's for sure.
So again, we're not talking about Fred Warner here when we're talking about Nakobe Dean, but it was clear he was a better player than Devin White. And by the way, that's what the Eagles wanted to happen. So now he hasn't performed, but they weren't going to bench him for Devin White. This meant they weren't going to play Devin White. So I mean, I don't know what to tell people.
I'm telling you now, John, and it's going to be fair. The Howie Roseman critique of him being able to evaluate defensive players is getting worse and worse. You're talking about 3.5 on Devin White. So you paid 3.5 to give Nakobe Dean competition. Okay, great. You paid $8 million to CJ Gardner-Johnson, who effectively stinks other than a good tackle every once in a while. You paid $51 million to Bryce Huff. He stinks and can't get around a tight end. I mean, shit, it looks like we should have just spent the extra money for Xavier McKinney and got a game-changing player, but the evaluation has been bad, and how he's going to get criticized for it, and it's going to be completely fair because the defense
Well,
looks
this is
first-round
not
draft picks aren't performing. And now you're cutting guys that, whether the expectation was fair or not from the fan base is another point. The evaluation of players on defense is putrid. It's putrid. And you're potentially talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, John, wasting the greatest offensive roster they've had in the history of the organization.
Yeah, well,
because
they better fix that too.
Well, the defense is putrid. I mean, that's the brutal truth right now. So when Devin White goes, I think it highlights a bunch of other things, especially for fans that went wrong. And you're like, boy, this was a bad offseason for Howie. It was a bad offseason. Right now, we're only 4 games in, but right now it's a bad offseason.
Well, they want to ignore Quinyon Mitchell, and people who don't like Howie are going to ignore, Zach Bond. You want to focus on Devin White. You tried it with 2 players and you got 1, maybe. And by the way, I'm not going to sit here and say Zach Bond is going to be good for 17 games because there's still a lot of uncertainty there,
John, and you know that. That would be like saying we failed on Saquon Barkley, but because Will Shipley was a good draft pick,
why doesn't it work? It worked with Jordan Mailata and Andre Dillard. As long as you get the player, I don't think it's a bad competition. As long as you get the player, who gives a crap where you get? That's my point. This whole thing is about pedigree. I'm not talking about. You can talk about Bryce Huff
because the defense is bad, so it's not about pedigree.
You're expanding it because a bunch of people thought Devin White was some kind of significant addition, and this was a dart throw. So if you want to blame him, this was Kaiser White who worked out. But guess what? If Kaiser White didn't work out, you just cut him and move on. Who cares? That's what this was. Yeah, you hope, you sit there and cross your fingers, but it's a lottery ticket, and it didn't work, so you cut ties. And by the way, the other guys developed better behind the scenes. This particular move is not a disappointment. Now, if you want to talk about the other moves, we can talk about the other moves. Bryce Huff, disappointment.
Well, it's the first domino to fall. I get what you're saying. Cutting Devin White, not that big of a deal. But when you look at that with the litany of other things they did on defense, it does start to look worse. But I get what you're saying. I mean, I'm making it a bigger scope than what the Devin White cut is.
Well, ironically, I think Howie probably did a better job, a worse job than the majority of the people. The disconnect is the over expectations on Devin White by far, number 1, and even a CJ Gardner-Johnson, number 2, who, people made into Ronnie Lott. There were a lot of holes back in 2022 when he had a career year. And I said pretty early, he's probably not going to have a career year again. So the expectations play into it a lot, but they'll get better on defense. It's a growing thing, and they'll get better because A, they have to get better, and B, Vic's a smart guy. But this particular player, look, I can't hold your hand. The film's all out there. Get $99, buy NFL Game Pass, watch the guy on film in Tampa Bay, and it will be a stark difference from what you thought because you read 9 sacks or you read some knucklehead say, this is an all-pro player. All-pro players who were number 5 picks in the draft don't get $3.5 million when they hit free agency. A, they don't hit free agency because they're so good they want to keep them. And B, if by some reason somebody's so incompetent from a financial perspective, they have to get somebody like that hit free agency, they get $100 million contract, not $3.5 million. to come resuscitate their career. I do not know why the perception, why I gave as many answers as I can on why the perception what it was. The contract told you everything. This was a dart throw. And guess what? It didn't hit the bullseye.
No.
Big deal.
No, it did not. No, you're right, though. I mean, I get what you're saying about Devin. I think my point is now I'm starting to look at all of the moves, and it's not just one dart that's failing right now; it's multiple. So we'll see how it all plays out. John, I will ask you about the rest of the linebacker core and what this means for them. Does this potentially mean more time? Is it no change at all because he wasn't even dressing? Does it mean
No
Jeremiah
change
Trotter?
at all. He was not involved. He was not relevant. He was not part of the same guys were the backups for the first 4 games. Ben Van Sumeren, Oren Burks, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Those were the backups. If Nakobe Dean got hurt, those are the guys they would be deciding between on who's going to play. He wasn't going to jump those guys. He wasn't even dressing. He wasn't even involved. He wasn't even part of the plan. And this is, by the way, if you want to criticize Howie on that, feel free. This guy should have been cut at the cut down to 53, but he's got a difficult time admitting mistakes. Anaya Smith should have been cut at the 53. James Bradbury should have been cut. You take it as far as you take it. If you can't get something to trade for it, you move on.
Yeah, that's what they were trying to do the last couple of weeks, right? Trade him.
Yeah, and who's going to trade? He signed for.
No, I knew nobody was going to, but I'm just saying. I had a comment like, "Oh, Howie's such a great guy, letting him go and pick his destination." I'm like, "Well, I don't know about that. I'm sure Howie."
Well, and by the way, they got some money back. That's why they let him go.
Wait, did they get some of the 3.5 back?
Yeah,
or was it just the
they
extra?
got some of the 3.5 back. I don't know the exact number, but they got some of the 3.5 back, and that's why they let him go.
That's
Otherwise,
a little confusing to me. I thought when you get 3.5 guaranteed, that means you're getting paid $3.5 million.
Well, it does, but Devin was willing to give some of it back in exchange to get released before the trade deadline. The trade deadline is key because after the trade deadline, everybody's got to go through waivers. Typically, vested veterans don't have to go through waivers. So if you cut somebody, they can sign with anybody immediately. But after the trade deadline, anybody who's released has to go through waivers. So in theory, he can't pick his destination. Actually, in practicality, nobody's claiming Devin White on waivers. So he would have gotten to pick his destination anyway. However, Howie would probably kick this can down the road to November 5th because he's trying desperately to get something because, as I just said, he's very hesitant to admit mistakes. And because of the high profile nature of this mistake, and I have no idea why it was high profile.
Well, the organization doesn't do a good job, John, of tempering some of these extra. I know you do, and I was ready for it, but like they talk some of these dudes up, John. I'm sorry, with the social media team and the accountability group chat and all this BS. Fans think they're getting this great player.
Well, that's hey.
I'm not blaming that on you. But I'm just saying sometimes the organization creates some of these expectations or furthers them, and it's makes
this is the run defense grades. For a guy you wanted to be the Eagles' middle linebacker. And I know we got to get to Mike Gill. 81 of 100, 82 of 96, 91 of 94, 83 of 90, 87 of 89. He was never a good player.
Got it, John. Let's get the 2 quick super chats. By the way, we didn't even get to the Robert Saleh news. I wanted to ask you about that, but we got caught up in Devin White, the release of Devin White this morning. And we'll talk to Mike Gill next, and then we'll probably get into Robert Saleh maybe a little bit after that. But let's go 2 super chats here, John, both from James Carver. James, big shout out to you, brother. Appreciate your support. He says, J-Mac, you admitted last year Ringo was a ton better in the games and not the practices. They should have at least tested that for Devin in any one game. And I'll read his second one because it's in a similar realm. He says, J-Mac, a tester would have been worth trying within a game. I don't care about his release. I care about not trying in a game. I think that's where a lot of people are. John, your thoughts and your response to Big James.
Well, right away, Kaylee Ringo never played before. This guy's played 76 NFL games.
Yeah, and you just gave us the numbers. They weren't good.
76 NFL games. That sample size is large enough. Coupled with what they saw in training camp. And again, what they saw in training camp is more of what, you're talking about a bunch of young players, Ben Van Sumer and Jeremiah Trotter, not so much Oren Burks, but those two particularly. They were trying to figure out, can we count on these guys? And once they said yes, then it was over. So it had more to do with those guys. If they didn't trust those guys,
right, they'd probably keep them here.
Yeah. So it had more to do with those guys. But yeah, the Ringo comparison, no. Ringo has barely played. This guy's played a ton. And most of it is bad film.
One more super chat. Brian Garner, appreciate it, brother. He says, I've watched White's tape from last year, and it's horrible. It's okay to make mistakes, but cut bait and move on. John, that's a Johnny Mac super chat right there from Brian Garner.
Well, I mean, anybody can do it. I it's all there. Any fan now in the old days, you couldn't do it. Now you can do it. Go watch if you think he's good. You wouldn't be happy if he had to play. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Well, James does bring up a good point. People will wonder that the style of defense is different. You talk about Bryce Huff not succeeding in this style. Maybe it would have been better for Devin. But anyway, we got to get to our commercial break. Let's get to Mike Gill coming up next here on Birds 365. Before I do that, everybody, let me tell you about our great friends at BetUS. Look at that on the screen. Promo code YouTube150 gets you a 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit. Then you get 125% on your second and third deposits, and that's all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more on BetUS.com, and that's BetUS.com.pa. Go to BetUS.com.pa. They got the fastest payouts in the industry, 24/7 customer support, and they'll even give you your own custom account manager, as well as up to 10% back on your losses twice a year. So if you pick Saquon to go over and he for whatever reason doesn't go over, BetUS will give you some relief on that. So go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. Birds 365 back in 3 minutes, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Bird 365. Here, joined by Mike Gill now from 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?
Good morning, everybody. We're up and at it, ready to go. Week 6 is already here. Can you believe it?
Week 6. Before we get there, we gotta let's put a bow, Mike, on Devin White, because you have a lot of guys in the Tampa area. You go down to Clearwater all the time, and hopefully everybody's okay down there. We say again as Hurricane Milton bears down on Florida, but not good. And you had this perception that you were getting some kind of star player. I never got it, Mike. Now you got to deal with callers, texters every day. Why do you think it is? Why do you think the perception with this particular player never matched the reality? Is it just being the number 5 overall pick forever?
Yeah, I mean, you're the number 5 pick, and then you start to gain some accolades with that. You know, he was an all-pro player, second-team all-pro in 2020.
Boy, that's a bad job, Mike. That's a bad job.
Right. Well, for whatever it is, he was when you get that guy who's a Pro Bowler. We all know a Pro Bowler doesn't mean anything. Yeah. But when you say that, it gives people some ammunition to be like, he was one of the elites. Now, you know, you look at the game today, like Tyler Huntley made the Pro Bowl because he was like the 9th alternate because they just ran out of quarterbacks. That doesn't make Huntley any good. But he was a Pro Bowl player in 2021, and that followed up his 2020 season in which he was an All-Pro. And to be fair to Devin, he did play very well to help that team win a Super Bowl.
He did, which was weird. He
had
was
a
tremendous in the
he
run.
Had a run during that Super Bowl season where, and from the people I don't watch his all 22 and his game tape all the time, but for the people I talk to down there, and multiple people, former players, people who cover the team, people who work for that team, have said he just didn't have it anymore. He freelanced so much. He just basically, didn't listen all that much. You know, he kind of did what he wanted to do. He's one of these guys, I think, he's a 5th overall pick as a linebacker. Think about that. What linebacker is getting taken 5th in the draft? That he was such a good, athlete at the college level and at the professional level that he was able to just get by on that. Well, it starts to catch up with you at this level. You can't just freelance and do what you want to do. And I think it just basically turned into a player who just didn't know what to do unless he was just freelancing. And the Eagles and Tampa Bay last year, go back and look at their inactive list. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't hurt in week 15 when he wasn't playing for them. So when you ask the question, what happened to this guy? Why did Tampa let an all-pro Pro Bowl player walk out the door and didn't have any problem doing so? And now you ask the question, the Eagles signed this guy. What are they doing? They had an all-pro linebacker. They saw what Tampa saw and said, hey, we'll take a shot with this guy, what we see what Tampa's saying. And now he's gone.
Mike, I want you to tell me if I'm overreacting. Howie Roseman has had a lot of misses this offseason in terms of the defensive side of the ball. Bryce Huff, I'm looking at 2 first-round draft picks, Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith, who are pretty underwhelming at best. Nakobe Dean is a meh type of player, not a difference maker at all. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's right now bottom of the league in terms of missed tackles and touchdowns given up in coverage. We got the greatest offense we've maybe ever had in franchise history in terms of talent, and we might squander it with a putrid defense. And when I think of the Devin White news, John's prepared me for the Devin White news that he's not the player everybody thinks he is. But now I'm looking at all the darts that were thrown on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm like, there's too many misses this year. This team's not going to succeed with this defense. Overreaction or not?
No, it's a fair. I don't know if it's an overreaction. I think it's a fair reaction. You're not overreacting. I look at Jordan Davis, and you're disappointed. In year 3, you're disappointed by him. It's not changing. This is who he is. He's not an impact player. Is he a decent player? Okay, fine. If you want to be nice, he's a decent player. He's not an impact player for where you drafted him. I'm not asking him to be Vita Vea, but you drafted a guy at that spot in the draft to do something special. He doesn't stop the run special. He's not a consistent anything. There's nothing consistent about his game. Is he a decent player? I'll be nice. Huff has been a bustaroni of epic proportions, and I don't know what you do to fix that. Is that he can't play, or is he in the wrong scheme? Whatever it is, he's not been a good fit here at all. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he hasn't played great. I'll give you that. I like the signing because you had a guy that gave you turnover potential. He was a guy who can get interceptions. He was a playmaker, something this defense lacked. It hasn't worked out through 4 games. Jury's out there. The linebacking situation is an organizational philosophy that they just don't give a rat's ass about. And these 2 guys in there are doing what they can do. They're okay. They're not awful. They're not killing. It's not like Nate Geary. That guy was awful playing linebacker. These guys are competent, but nothing spectacular. Obviously, Nolan Smith has been a major disappointment. You draft that guy in the first round, and he can't even hand the quarterback a handkerchief. He can't get near him. He can't get near him. So, yeah, they've had a lot of issues on that side of the ball with, quite frankly, guys we're talking about that, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith. So far, Cooper DeJean hasn't helped you, and that's injury. He couldn't get on the field. Mitchell's been a pretty good player. You got to give it to that. So, yeah, they've got some high picks that have missed. And, quite frankly, the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I think the jury's still out on that one. But you're not overreacting. The defense is not good enough. And coupled with, there's nobody that you feel like they're underperforming. And if maybe Huff. If Huff, but I don't know. My opinion was, even if he's as good as he can be, he ain't Hassan Reddick good. And if he's not on that level, this defense is lesser than it already was. So you brought in a lesser player than you had on a defense that already wasn't good.
Yeah, and you got Vic Fangio. Scheme it up, Vic. Scheme it up.
I think that might have been the thought was, hey, we'll swap out because Huff is younger. We can't justify the money to Reddick. So can you come to terms with that? We couldn't pay Reddick because of the age. Okay, we all kind of can understand. I don't think there's a lot of people out there barking to pay Reddick, right?
No,
I think right now they're looking back like shit.
Yeah, but at the time, even if you say, why do we just pay the guy? I don't think anybody was fighting to pay him. So they tried to replace him with a younger guy. And I said at the time, I said, look, even if he's as good as he can be, he's not better than Reddick was. And now you have a lesser player. Even at his best, he's a lesser player. How do you think this defense now? They tried to go get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They drafted 2 corners. Okay, let's see it come together. Look, we're in week 4 for them. They've played 4 games. We're in week 6. They had a bye, but there's some growing to do. I think the problem a lot of people are coming to terms with is the ceiling of the growth doesn't feel all that high with this bunch.
Yeah, and I think, to the point about the edge rushers, it's one thing for Bryce Huff to not be Hassan Reddick. I never expect him to be Hassan Reddick. But do you expect the combination of Huff and the first-round draft pick you spent on an edge rusher 2 years ago to make up for some of that? I did. And now they've both been a nothing burger, and that is accentuating the problem in a big way.
I think they did too. I think you figure we got 2 guys that can replace one, and maybe they had higher hopes for Huff. They gave him some decent amount of money.
They definitely.
It's not like they tried to. It wasn't one of these Howie deals where he tries to sneak a guy in, low cost, high reward. They've done that with like the Patrick Robinsons, Devin White. He's tried this before where he finds these high first round talents, pays them on the 1-year deal, and tries to sneak something out of them. and it's worked for them in the past. This year, it's not working.
Yeah, I feel like they do it a lot, though, and it usually doesn't work. And I think people go, well, Chris Long and the Super Bowl season, as you mentioned, where it seemed like everything worked. And that's why they went to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl, because everything worked. But typically, when you make a dart throw, you don't hit the bullseye. And that happens more often than not, because they've done it a ton over the past 2 years. Just bringing in these reclamation projects. And I don't know, maybe it's time to stop that. Now, Saquon's not a reclamation project, but if you think about think about last year with Terrell Edmonds. Oh, he's a first round pick. He played 5 years for the Steelers. They do this all the time.
Yeah, this is a blueprint for them. High risk or low risk, high reward opportunities. We're not going to pay you much. You had talent. Somebody, gave up on you. We'll take a shot. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll move on. And it's a low compensation for a lot of these guys. On the defensive side of the ball, though, I don't know where you go in season right now. It happens very rarely. I guess trades in the NFL happen more now than they used to.
A little bit more, but still it's rare.
Rare.
Especially you talking about you need an impact player. It's just not going to happen.
You saw Chase Young get traded last year. People, oh my God, San Francisco, that defense added Chase Young. He didn't do anything to help that team. In fact, he's now on a different team because they said, all right, we're ready to move on.
Yeah.
Montez Sweat, decent player with Chicago. Okay, can you find some of that? Here's one of the problems. You got 10 teams in the NFC right now that are either 500 or better, and I say 10 because San Francisco is 2 and 3. I think we kind of believe in them. They would be the 10th team. 9 teams are 500 or better. So almost every team in the NFC right now kind of thinks that they're a player. They kind of think they're in this thing. The AFC is a disaster. So which teams are you calling? All right, you're probably hoping Cincinnati loses a couple more games. Maybe they start to, hey, here's Hendrickson. We'll try to find some guys. That's the only opportunity you can get is a team like last year, Washington, who just kind of said, all right, we're spinning our wheels and changing the whole organization around. But you talk about throwing a dart. That's what you're really waiting for. You're really waiting for someone else's season to fall apart. And if that doesn't happen, this is what you got. And I'm telling you, in week 5 for me, I just don't see where all of a sudden they generate pass rush. And if you don't, you're going into every week relying on that offense to score 35 points, and that's a lot to ask.
Yeah, it is. And we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, I do think I'm not quite as willing to shut the door on the upside of certain people. And hopefully, Nolan Smith is still a very young player, and I feel like everybody slammed the door on that guy. And maybe they should, but I think it's.
I think with Nolan Smith, John, the one issue that I have, and probably many, is you just see him on the field, and he just looks like he doesn't belong. And he's just so small.
He looks more like a linebacker. He doesn't look like a dominant edge rusher.
I mean, he looks like a corner at times. I mean, you're like, what is this guy doing?
Well, that's the modern NFL. You get those types of players. Like some of these linebackers teams roll out.
He's really small, though. Man, he's really small.
I
feel like he gets no leverage, and these tackles are literally just riding him and then pushing him, and he gets no leverage.
That's the problem. And then, you get the Bijan Robinson chip block where he knocked him to another universe, and that's not a good look.
You watch him on these all 22s, he looks lost. He looks like he's trying to just run circles around these tackles, and these tackles are like, what are you doing, dude? And they're pushing him with like one hand.
There's a lot of good tackles in the NFL.
Yeah. Well, John, where I'll agree with you is I do think he should be given a little more time. My problem with that is, I mean, look, you're talking to a town that had Brandon Graham. He didn't come alive until what, year 4, year 5, and he's now been one of the greatest Eagles to ever play in our uniform.
200 games this week.
I get it, but here's the problem. Super Bowl windows aren't open that long. And right now, our offense.
You could argue it's already closed with that.
Right. So
I
it's
don't know
like,
what to think of this team.
We get this offense that we spend all this money on. They're, like I said, arguably the greatest collection of talent on the offensive side of the ball that's ever resided in the city of Philadelphia. And we got a bunch of dudes on defense who are underperforming. This is where I'm like starting to look at Howie. I'm like, dude, you squandered this opportunity by being stingy on the defensive side, or he just can't.
Well, you
He can't
can't
evaluate guys.
you can't have everything. Obviously, I've said this from the start. Clearly, what this team said is, all right, we're going to get really good on offense, and Vic will figure it out on defense. That was the plan. That remains the plan.
Vic
Mike
Fangio from
said,
defensive coordinator to magician.
Mike said, they got to score 35 points a game. All right, go score 35 points a game. You hear what Zander's saying. They have the greatest collection of talent in the history of Philadelphia. Go score 35 points.
Listen, we have seen, and this happened there, like Dallas last week. You lose Parsons and Lawrence, and they had their best defensive effort of the season. There are weeks where you're going. They played well against the Saints. I mean, they had a good game against the Saints. So there are going to be weeks where they do play well, and the offense is going to perform, and you're going to have that game because the offense should be good enough that they, we talked about this before. This should be a team that scores. I think I said about 29 points a game was about the average you're hoping for, and they can get around there. And there's going to be some weeks where the defense just has a really good game plan, and it does work. And you're like, where's this defense been? You know those games are coming. They're in there somewhere. They had them last year. Last year against Miami, the defense played excellent against a really good offense.
Mike. They had it 2 weeks ago versus the Saints.
Against the Saints. The problem is, in this league, to be a really good defense, you have to be consistent, and they don't have enough consistency. So yes, they can do it for 1 week, and you're like, where's this been? But they don't have consistent enough talent. Zach Bond in week 1, you're talking about an all-pro performance. He had 3 sacks. He's all over the place. And then, the next week he gets schemed up. Well, they were chop blocking him. Well, the next week, you didn't see him chop blocking him. We worked on that all week. Well, the consistency is you got to do it every week. And that's why they're not a very good defense. They don't have consistent enough talent right now on that side of the ball. And part of it is, look, you got a lot of young players trying to find their way. You got a lot of new guys trying to figure out the new system. Does that mean in week 14 they're going to be much better than they are in week 4? You damn hope so, right?
Yeah. No, and we'll see. I mean, a lot of the early issues have to deal with injuries, and we know they're not the same team without Lane Johnson, particularly on the field, without AJ Brown, particularly on the field. And this past game against Tampa Bay before the bye, you had Devontae Smith. So a lot of the offensive struggles, I think, are self-correcting. Defensively, Vic's got to figure some stuff out. And I think that is part of the problem as well. Boy, you and I talk about coaching all the time. I think fans put way too much emphasis on coaching. These guys were supposed to be a lot better than the old guys. Everything looks similar to the point that everybody says, Mike, everybody says when things go bad, that's Sirianni. When things don't go bad, hey, Kellen Moore's getting to do what he wants. And with Beck, he's got a little bit more cachet. So give him a rope. Technically, if you want to go back to last year, early in the season, Sean Desai was doing better than Vic Fangio till the wheels came up.
This is the same story in all Philadelphia sports. It's always the coach, and it's always personality over performance, right? Always. We talked about it, I think, last time. They love Buddy Ryan. Andy Reid sucked. Why? Well, Buddy Ryan said he would punch Jimmy Johnson in the face, and Andy Reid was not a very personality-driven guy. Andy Reid runs circles around Buddy Ryan as a coach. But that's why just to go to your comment about Vic, people like the crustiness and tell it like it is of Fangio. So far, his defense has not been very impressive. The adjustments aren't there, the things that they're doing. Now, do we trust that Vic is going to make those changes? You're right. He's not getting – now, there are certain people I think that just don't like – they didn't like Gannon's defense, although Gannon is would you take Gannon back?
Yeah.
I don't think they would.
Yeah, please.
I don't think most of them would.
Well,
some.
John, you and I are the same. I don't like this style of defense, but this is today's game. A lot of people kind of took this Fangio defense and kind of ran with it across the league. But we've asked the question now, have the offenses kind of caught up to that style and started to say, you're going to play this Fangio style of defense. Now we're going to do this. and everything is against the Eagles, where they have trouble, is this is the crazy part about that defense. You're relying on people to do something you can't practice. Tackle. You can't tackle, and your defense is predicated on being able to tackle. And you say, well, all defense has to tackle. This defense is predicated on letting you catch the ball in front of you and come up and make a tackle. You're asking guys who never tackle to tackle, and that's the basis of your defense in today's game. It doesn't – you're hoping that 4 guys up front get pressure, and they don't really have 4 guys that are capable of doing that on this roster. So this defensive scheme seems to be flawed with this talent.
This scheme is so overrated, Mike. It's never won in the league. Vic Fangio is like, the dude is all this pedigree. He's never won, Mike. And look at the Chiefs. I mean, and this is where I think we're hamstrung a little bit.
Well, a lot of times, to be fair, he didn't win because his offenses that he's been a part. Chicago hasn't had a quarterback in our lifetime.
That's fair. But I mean,
Denver Broncos.
Here's where I think the Eagles are a little bit more hamstrung. I mean, look at what the Chiefs have done in the last couple of years. I think there's a stat that somebody just put in here, and I'd have to double check on the validity of the stat. But the Chiefs haven't allowed 28 points in 26 games. They've completely changed their philosophy with Steve Spagnuolo and have loaded up on the defensive side of the ball. They're shooing off it. They're getting rid of offensive talent left and right. And they're now loading up the defense. It almost feels like there's a switch happening in the NFL, and the Eagles are way behind the 8 ball because their defense is nowhere near a Super Bowl caliber. Not even in the ballpark of a Super Bowl caliber defense. And I wonder if, that's the problem with our elite quarterback or our elite quarterback that's paid like an elite quarterback. Mahomes, you can shed talent and you're still going to win. You're still going to make hay. We shed talent here. We've already seen what Jalen is without these superstars on offense. I mean, we've got $200 million on offense. How good can our defense really be?
Yeah. I mean, and that's, you just watch the league and on some of these primetime games, and they're just, Atlanta, good team, not a great team. Tampa, good team, not a great team. New Orleans, good team, not a great team. And there's fluidity in what they do offensively, just quick, here, bang, 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 and let their guys do stuff. You just mentioned Kansas City doesn't have Juju Smith-Schuster. How old is he? 50? And he's open all the time. Bang, here, catch it and go.
Elevate.
The predication, they predicated on what the Eagles try to do. Nobody can tackle you. So just get the ball to the guy 5 yards and let someone try to tackle you. You have 2 unbelievable playmakers, and yet you're only seemingly trying to get them the ball in one manner down the field. And I get it, the big play. It's like Al Davis took over this organization and said, you just got to chuck the ball down the field.
Is that the quarterback or the organization?
That's a good question, because the quarterback, to me, is not that player. He's not that guy. He should be 1, 2, 3, bang. Like these teams, all 1, 2, 3, or shotgun, here you go, bang. A.J. Brown, make a guy miss, make another guy miss, 8 yards. Bang. That's what all these teams are doing to you, and you're not doing it. Now, you're shorthanded, and you're not doing it. I mean, what are you doing? That's what's been perplexing so far through 4 weeks. The whole premise, we talked about it on my show, John, with you. You're down 2 receivers. You run 9 plays, 7 of them are passing plays on the first drive. What are you doing? And then you look at the scoreboard. Well, we ran 6 plays. We're down 21-0. We couldn't run the ball. Well, no crap, because when you had the ball, you threw it every single time to I can't even think of the guy's name. Who's playing wide receiver for this team?
Jahan Dotson. He scored touchdowns at Kansas City like
John Ross. Yeah, it's a great.
Yeah, you're throwing to Paris Campbell and wondering why you went 3 and out.
Johnny Wilson. Don't forget Johnny.
So
Jahan Dotson. What about the 3rd round pick we sent for Jahan Dotson? Is that on Howie or is that on the quarterback, Mike?
And a lot of these things, the hindsight is easy. The fans thought that was a great idea.
Wow, they loved it. How are you gonna cover these 3 guys?
I tell you what, I got, not to toot my own horn, but I was not a fan of that trade, and I went back and watched the video on JAKIB of me criticizing it, and I got ripped in the comments.
Welcome,
you got to have
welcome to the world.
convictions in your arguments, and that's a good one. If you didn't like it, I think most people said, "Man, you got a first round." And by the way, it's that you're dealing with a Washington franchise who had been so downrotten, and you're thinking, "Man, what are these idiots?" And look, he has not made any impact. In fact, it's funny that we talk about this Dotson thing because now I'm seeing people, these GMs who are trying to find trades for the deadline, and they're saying, well, the Eagles should make a trade for Amari Cooper. Now you're already looking for another wide receiver on this team.
Those people should be put away.
John, I saw the Bleacher Report on Devontae Adams. I immediately thought of you. I'm
Oh,
I know, John.
These aggregators need to be stopped from society.
It's like remember, I guess this was in the mid '90s when Detroit drafted wide receivers like 3 straight years. It was like, wow, look at this receiving core they have. It's like Charles Rogers and can't even remember.
Well, you're if you're trying to fix it, teams will do that. They'll sort of carpet bomb a particular position. That's fine if you do it in the draft. The Eagles did it for a while till they fixed wide receiver, but these Devontae Adams is a fit for the Eagles stories. I mean, I don't, I'm not a supporter of corporal punishment, but these people should be punished. I mean, and they create just a whole cottage industry of uneducated people. It's just so frustrating. But I digress. 2021 Mike Gill coaching class. There's 2 left. And probably the 2 that get made fun of the most. Also the 2 most successful. Dan Campbell in Detroit, Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia. Everybody else is gone. Robert Saleh, the latest.
Both, by the way, are CEO coaches. And, nobody asks what Dan Campbell does, do they?
No, they're busy toilet paper in his house or whatever.
But, hey, there you go. Personality over performance. They like Dan Campbell's personality.
Well, I don't know. They didn't like it in the NFC Championship game. They didn't.
Yeah, but I think he's generally favorable. I think his Q rating is generally pretty favorable.
Well, yeah, he's on Applebee's.
He's in the Applebee's commercials. People like Dan Campbell because he has this personality. And that.
Well, he did have to move, Mike. He did have to move in Detroit because the people found out where he lived.
Jeez.
Mike, you didn't see that story? Yeah, they started going at his house and everything with tools, all sorts of crap. Because of, what was that, John? Because of the NFC title game?
Yeah. Well, and what does he do? He makes the decisions on when to go, when not to go, similar to what Nick Sirianni does. But it's funny. I meant to ask you this yesterday. We were kind of tied up with the baseball and everything, but with Saleh getting fired, the heat gets cranked up to the next guy. Who's the next guy?
Yeah, I just don't think Jeffrey Lurie's that guy. He did it once, but it was at the end of the Chip Kelly era, and it was for 1 game.
Yeah,
but I do not think
he survived the bye week. Much, like what's happened with the Jets. It's like, hey, we're in London. If we're going to do it because we don't think this is getting better, now's the time. I think Sirianni has made it. I don't think that.
Yeah, he's not getting fired during the season.
What if they're 4-10?
All right, let me ask you this, because I wondered this when this news broke yesterday on Robert Saleh. I know it's not the Eagles' way, but you're talking about, and John, you talk about expectations all the time. Well, expectations matter, and it's hard for me to believe that the owner of this team, Jeffrey Lurie, didn't have bigger expectations.
Oh,
someone just broke the dam open in New York, though. You no longer have to be the first guy to make a switch because you're trying to reach expectations in a window. If Nick Sirianni comes out and this team loses to the worst offense in the league right now in the Browns that haven't had, they're the only team that hasn't had a 300-yard game. They're putrid. If they lose to this team, the Browns, you guys take no shot at Nick Sirianni getting fired?
Mike?
I tend to think no shot, but I think your point is valid, Zander, is at what point does the owner say the expectations were this and we're not getting there and we don't seem to be pacing towards getting there? Can it be salvaged? They did make a coordinator change in season last year, and I know that's not the same, but that was at a pretty drastic time when you're 10-2.
Actually, it
and you
wasn't
just-
a drastic time. It was the opposite. You were 10-1.
Well, that's
and
the
he
thing.
was
You could
thinking
have
about
argued
it
it was too
before.
late.
But that's what I'm saying. You're 10-1, and you make the decision at that point to just change the coordinator. You don't think that's drastic?
He would
Like-
no. I meant it by you shouldn't have made the change because they were, and he was thinking about
Well,
it.
that's
during
what
the
I'm
bye
saying
week.
is drastic about
Yeah.
it. Like you just decide to change your coordinator at that stage. Like that's
Yeah,
a
well,
drastic
the whole
move.
that's a story. That's a story deserving of a book in its own right. But
Yeah.
that the fact that that's one of the things that we don't have. Like, there's no way Sean Desai should have got fired. There's no way from an objective standpoint he should have got fired.
But what I would ask you, John, is were they, Buffalo made a offensive coordinator change a few weeks before, and it kind of sparked them, So to the point
No, it
that
didn't
you look
spark
at
them.
what's that?
It didn't spark them.
Well,
didn't spark the Eagles.
No, that's my point is. Buffalo changed coordinators, and it sparked them. New York fires their coach. Does Philadelphia say, hey, they got rid of their guy? Now that gives us the ability, if we want to. We don't want to be the first. We don't want to be the one. But somebody else did it. Maybe now it's something.
Well,
that
there's
that
always
opens the door.
something like, to Zander's point, no, Jeffrey Lurie's not going to fire his coach in season. Now, I say that, and if Nick Sirianni turns into, which I don't see happening, but I mean, there's always things you don't see. Like if he becomes so unhappy that he just wants out the door, maybe that changes the conversation. I don't think that's going to happen. In the case of Sean Desai, clearly guys, they felt he didn't have the personality to command a room, to lead men. I hate that conversation, by the way, that phrase, leader of men. They just didn't feel like people were listening to him. He didn't have the gravitas to be in that position. So it's sort of like an intangible thing, but there's always something. Like when you're 8-1, you don't think about firing the defensive coordinator. That's when it first popped into Nick Sirianni's head. Even if you're playing poorly on that side of the ball, they had some good games, they had some bad games. You don't do it. But they felt long-term, look, we didn't hire the right guy. They went in a different direction. And it, by the way, it was a disaster, rightly or wrongly. In the case of Nick Sirianni, I don't think that's going to happen, but that's the only way he's getting fired. Now, if he loses the next 4 games, all right, then you can open up the conversation, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, here's my only pushback, and this is why Nick Sirianni's on the watch for me, because if Jeffrey Lurie's even thinking about this, if he's not thinking about it, you're right, John, he's not going to fire him until after the year. If it's even crossed his mind right now about Nick, wouldn't he make the move early to try and salvage the season in terms of waiting? If you lose the next 4, you're going to be effectively eliminated.
He's not going to lose the next 4. I get
it. If you promote somebody now at 2-3 with the NFC wide open, Jeffrey Lurie could justify in his mind, we got this great roster. We might be able to turn this thing around. Versus if you wait too long on Nick and then you make the move in week 10 or week 12, shit, it's a lost cause at that point.
He's not doing that. That's
what I said. If
This
he's not
is
thinking about it, you're right. He probably won't.
This is not the New York Jets. There's shitty organizations. There's
the
good
Jets have as many Super Bowls as we do. So
yeah, but that's not the point. Right now they're a shitty organization, and they have been a shitty organization for years. It's like Washington. That's why people thought they fleeced John Dotson, not realizing it's not the same organization. Now you have a smart guy at GM. Now you have an owner that's at least going to be competent, although some Sixers fans might disagree, but he's not a disaster like Daniel Snyder. They're different. The Eagles are different. Whether you don't think they've won enough Super Bowls, they're a good organization. They're a steady organization for the most part. And I criticize Jeffrey Lurie all the time for his scapegoating when expectations aren't reached. Not perfect, but he's not the guy who's going to make rash decisions in week 4 when you don't have AJ freaking Brown for 3 of those 4 games. He's not that guy, and you don't want that guy.
I'm not saying I do, but John, you do have to wonder. I mean, look at this offense, man. AJ got paid. Devontae got paid.
By the way, that's the second part. Who's the head coach?
Nick.
No, who's the head coach if you fire Nick?
Oh, Kellen. I would do Kellen.
This guy can't put together a script to get a first down. They've had 13 plays to start games for 12 yards. And people think this guy is the next great head coach.
Real quick, you were saying, Zander, look at this offense. I think they are saying, look, we just played 3 games without A.J. Brown. We are going to struggle. We played another game without Lane and Smith and Brown all at the same time. I think if you told me that at training camp, that would be a problem. So I don't know that they're evaluating their offense fully at this point to make rash decisions. They might be disappointed, but they also have to be realistic to say, look, we're 2-2. We just played a game without Smith, Brown, Johnson. We kind of like where we are. Now,
That's
4 weeks from now.
Big though, Mike. Everybody comes back. If they stink versus the lowly Brown.
4 weeks from now, if you're looking at this team and saying we're 2-6, this conversation is probably going to come back up.
Yeah, they might stink this weekend offensively. I would say there's more of a chance for that than defensively, believe it or not, because Cleveland's still got a bunch of good players on defense.
Well, in this field, you got pretty good defense. I talked to you about this, John, yesterday. All of a sudden, Jim Schwartz blitzes more than anybody in the league. They are 3rd blitz rate in the league. They blitz 39% of the time. You got Myles Garrett. You got a defense over there that took them to the playoffs last year. What has happened to that defense
and Joe
this
Flacco.
year? And the overcorrection stuff. Like, oh my God, their offense has been so bad. Everybody bets against them, and then this is the week they bounce back and have a competent, refocus of simplifying things. We'll see. I don't know. Their offense has been bad pretty much the whole season, but their defense is pretty solid.
That the Philadelphia trust in Kellen Moore is wild. Now that Devin White is gone, I'm going to start focusing on that. That is wild. This guy's put together, and I guess it comes down to people don't think he's putting together the game plans. He's putting together the game plans. And they've run 13 plays this year to open games and gotten 12 yards. And hey, fire the coach and put Kellen Moore in there. He'll fix it. Boy, Jalen Hurts has regressed.
My favorite my thought that it goes through my head all the time with the fan base for all the sports in this town. Let's fire the coach or the manager so I can complain about the next one.
That's true.
I mean, it's essentially it. We hate Brett Brown, fire him. We get Doc Rivers. Yes, this guy won a championship. He sucks. Get rid of him.
Yep.
You get Joe Girardi. He won a World Series. He sucks. Get rid of him. Now this guy sucks. Kapler sucked. They all sucked.
Well, think about the coordinators.
So I can complain about the next one. At what point does it finally?
The only guys who leave, Frank Reich, who, by the way, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman wanted to fire after the 2016 season, and Doug talked him out of it. Then they won the Super Bowl. So Frank gets to leave on his own terms. And Shane got to leave on his own terms. Everybody else, they hate, as you pointed out, the Mike Rose of the world, the Press Taylors, the Rich Scangarellas.
It's the age-old thing, because they know they can't play the game, but they deep down believe they could do that job if they had the opportunity to do it. If they put in the time, the blood, the sweat, the tears, the time of wait, they believe they could do that job better than the guys there. So they always say the coach is the problem because I could do a better job. You can't blame the player because you can't do a better job. And every coach, get rid of him. He stinks. And then you complain about the next one. At what point do you finally come to terms with that's not the issues all the time? Does this have a role? It has a role, but it's not why your team is not where you want it to be all the time. You don't have the talent. The Phillies, their lineup is not good enough. It's not Rob Thompson, this, that, and the other. They don't hit. They don't have you're hitting Bryson Stott in the 5-hole one day, and the next day he's not even good enough to be in your lineup. You're not good enough.
But Mike, here's the problem with that, because if you're the owner and you're looking at it, you're like, all right, you're right. All right, so now who's to blame? You paid Jalen Hurts $52 million. Is he not good enough? Is that part of the problem? Now you're getting into way bigger wormholes where it's like, well, I could fire Nick pretty easily. I can't fire Jalen Hurts.
Quarterback pay, Zander, is a tough one because these teams get back into a corner where they don't have really options. There's only so many guys that can play that position. And when you have a guy that shows competency that could do it, he did it at almost the highest of high levels. He almost won the Super Bowl. And again, you can make an argument that he was the best player on the field in that Super Bowl.
Yeah, no,
and
he
when
was.
Times,
but if it's the Jimmy's and Joe's, Mike, then who's the next guy you got to blame? It's Howie. That's why I started the show on defense. It's Howie. Every dart he threw this year on defense was a miss. I joked it was a butter knife. He's not throwing darts anymore. He's throwing butter knives.
I think the roster construction, we go to the Phillies. I say Dave Dombrowski, for 3 years, this team has failed because their offense is too inconsistent. And he never went out and got another bat. He kept the same offense 2022, 2023, 2024. It's the same guys. That's a roster construction. So, yeah, you want to talk about the roster construction that they don't have the right talent right now. I don't think you can argue that. Now, are you going to get it every year? The problem is, like, for the organizations, it's a building block. It's a process. They want consistent, good seasons, great seasons. And you figure if we're consistently good, one of those years we will do the ultimate. But the fans want to be the best team every year. They don't look at it like they understand we can't win every year, but we have to build towards something. They look long term. We look.
And by the way, that's the right way to do it. That's the way Andy Reid did it. That was his whole philosophy.
But that's the disconnect between why fans overreact and get irrational. Is we live in the moment. They live big picture. And when you have a big picture thinker and an in the moment thinker, they're going to clash. And you're going to have people who don't like the results of, we all have the text group. You're watching a play and your buddy says, "What the F is this?" And you're like, dude, it's 3rd down and 3 in the second quarter of the game. Relax. But people can't. They live in that moment right there. Whereas that play for Kellen Moore, and you hope anyway, if he's doing his job, maybe that play didn't work up, but it's setting up a play that I can use in the 4th quarter. I show that formation. They see this, and then I have something I can run off of it. If he's a really good coordinator, he's using plays that might not work to set up something later. But we can't. Yeah. Fans can't wrap their heads around that aspect of the big picture, and that's where the disconnect collides of this coach sucks, because generally they're thinking big picture and fans are thinking this play right here. Every play has to be a touchdown. And if it's not, you failed. And that's not the way they think.
And by the way, the Phillies have it worse than even the Eagles, because this is a football city, football mentality, and they treat baseball games like they treat football games, which are, in the regular season, that's fine. In the playoffs, when you play 162, sometimes you want to save somebody's arm, and you don't care if you lose 14-3, if you're getting blown out, and say, you know what, I'm not going to waste anybody out. And they're like, why is this pitcher out there? Why is this? You got to think about things from a long-term perspective. That's Howie's job.
And there's a fine line too of how much did you take your foot off the gas and not keep competitive games. I mean, and we talk about this with the Phillies were the wild card team. They kept playing high intensity baseball. When you're playing high intensity baseball every day, that's a different brand of baseball. And the Mets look like a team that's had some juice pushing on them for 3 weeks. And the Phillies just kind of looked like they were out playing golf, smoking stogies with their feet up. And now you're getting into high intensity pressure cookers. Not great. Not great.
Yeah, hopefully the Phillies extend the series, because Philadelphia needs something, because these people need something. At Mike Gill Show, make sure you listen to Mike down the shore if you're local in the South Jersey area, 2 to 6, the Sports Bash. Thanks, Mike. We kept you late, but you're always great. That's why we keep you late.
Mike, appreciate it, man. Great stuff today.
All right, everybody. We'll see you.
Thanks, bud.
Johnny Mac, before we get to our break, we got BLG coming up in 9 minutes. Appreciate everybody being here. Today got a great crowd in here this morning. Appreciate all of you guys. The latest news in Eagle Land, Devin White was released yesterday. We broke that down really all in hour number 1 there with Mike Gill. John, here's the one pushback, because I do agree with you guys on the coaches. It's always easy to scapegoat coaches. But here's the one thing, and I'd like to get your response to this. Doesn't some of it have to go on the coaches eventually, though? Like, and here's what I mean. And you've talked about this with Kellen Moore. You're down A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Lane Johnson. You come out and throw the ball 9 times. Like, that's bad coaching. You come in versus defense versus Baker Mayfield. Every cornerback is 10, 12 yards off the receiver. We had Eric Allen on This Week in Pro Football last Thursday on JAKIB Sports. Eric Allen. He's like, yeah, I don't really get that philosophy on defense. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, that's coaching, right? Now, if the players don't perform, I get it. That's the players. But the coaches can still be better. No?
Well, sure. And you can have it both ways. You'll hear the coaches constantly say, I got to do a better job because they want to protect the players. And I think too many people take that seriously. In the case of the coaches, Vic, because, I believe Vic, and I believe Vic because he's a history of being honest. And he said, I was telling them to play tighter, and they didn't play tighter. So, where is that sort of demarcation line? They're not out there.
Right.
And that's why, can they be better? Of course. I mean, you got to be better scripting games to start. That's what you spend most of your time on. That's when you should be your sharpest, to be honest. And the Eagles have been the worst team in football. And my point to that is everybody wants to elevate that guy to be the head coach. They convince themselves, ties themselves into well, that's Nick Sirianni. All right. Is it? You're so sure about that? You're 100% sure about that? Because I can tell you 100% it's not Nick Sirianni. The guy scripting the plays is 13 yards in 12 plays, or I think 12 yards in 13 plays, one or the other. The only team in the NFL that hasn't scored in the first quarter. Only team in the NFL.
Well,
this guy ain't Bill Walsh.
Will they break that streak on Sunday?
Will they score in the first quarter? Yes.
Right.
Will they score on the first drive? Probably not. I mean, and most of it, again, is they've gotten, if you look at each game, all 4 games, they've gotten behind the sticks on the first drive. Be a penalty, fumble, what have you. They've gotten behind the sticks in all 4 of the drives. And all Kellen Moore's talked about since he got here, while everybody else is talking about the motion, clean operation, clean operation, clean operation. And this is guy everybody wants to elevate to be the head coach. If they do fire Nick Sirianni, I'm going with Vic Fangio to be the head coach. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, here's why I said Kellen, because 1, they like offensive minds, and 2, they interviewed Kellen a couple years ago when Nick got the job. That's why I was like, maybe they would.
And I'm not saying the organization will do that, because you're right.
You're saying you'd go with Vic.
Yes, I'm saying I would go with Vic Fangio, and it's not close, to be honest. At least he commands a room. Yeah, but I think it's amazing the assumption that, look, the vast majority, and I guarantee you, Jets fans are like, fire Robert Saleh, fire Rob, and it's not just Eagles fans, and they're never thinking about who's next, who they want, who's going to be better. The Eagles don't have a better option than Nick Sirianni right now.
Yeah, the problem is, I mean, like, I looked at the Robert Saleh thing, and I get it. It's easy to call for the coach. Robert Saleh had Zach Wilson as his starting quarterback for 90% of the games he was the head coach. He had Mike White. He had Joe Flacco.
Yeah, 6 different quarterbacks.
And Aaron Rodgers played like 6 of them.
And they have a good defense.
Their defense is top 3 in the league right now in everything. I mean, their defense
they're
is
very
playing
good.
lights out.
Nobody can cover Justin Jefferson, and they covered Justin
I
Jefferson.
know, but don't you think that brings like a bigger thing on Nick? Like we talked about Dan Campbell and Detroit, and I'm like, well, it's a good point, but Dan Campbell did it in Detroit. They've stunk for years. Nick Sirianni, in a way, did inherit a pretty damn good football team.
He inherited, and
The
he
best team out
knows
of all the coaches that year, for
he
sure.
knows he's lucky with the offensive line he inherited. He knows. He talks about it all the time. Typically, when you're a head coach, you're taking over a bad situation, and generally that starts up front, either side of the football. And he inherited a very good offensive line and a very good defensive line, which is unfortunately started to trend in a negative direction. And that's rare for a first year head coach, because they're usually coming into bad situations. So yeah, Nick came into the best situation of that group. And, but on the other hand, he's been the most successful overall of that group. So, it's a bottom line business. You're right to add that context. He probably shits the bed with the Jets, and maybe he's worse than even Robert Saleh. But that's the reality of
We
the
call
NFL.
Robert Saleh to help us with Bryce Huff, John. Hey, Robert, what'd you do with this guy that made it work? Because we can't get shit out of him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hey, everybody in New York thinks he can play,
including Robert. So maybe call him up. Let's get to a couple supers. I want to get out of here. So, because we got BLG coming up in about 3 minutes. So I want to get to our commercial break. Caleb Brandon checks in. We got 2 from Caleb. Caleb, big shout out to you, brother. Thank you for being here. He says, we don't run the best running back league in the league on first down. I don't care how many coaching changes we had, blaming players for this horrendous play calling. I just don't get it. That's where, look, there's both deserve blame, John. I agree with you that you can't put it all on players, but there is some things that this coaching staff is doing. It almost defies common sense. You don't have AJ and Devontae, and you come out and you start slinging the ball around the yard. It's like, what? Run the ball with Saquon. He's right there. I don't, that's what drives me crazy. So, but
well, I don't. Saquon, generally has not been effective early in games. I mean, if you look at Tampa, first play, he flushes right. Everybody loses their mind because Saquon gets open late in the process, and that shitty throw, whatever Jalen was trying to do.
Yeah.
Then the 2nd and 10, they run it to Saquon, no gain. 3rd and 10 was a short pass to Dallas Goedert, and Dallas made 7 yards. And then they're in punt formation. Then they get backed up with a false start, and they punt the football. That was the first drive. If you go back to Green Bay, the first one, the first play was a pitch to Saquon Barkley. Shitty field. He slips. They lose 5 yards. They're behind the sticks. I think a lot of this is they tried to get the ball to Saquon Barkley early in games. It's been ineffective for various reasons. And then later, he pops off and has some good runs and home run. And I think that inflates that, not getting yardage early.
Yeah, I get it. Caleb checks in again. If they fire Nick, I don't want nobody in that building. Call Bill or Doug P. I'm tired of the passing on first and bend but don't break. Need a vet coach. Caleb expressing some frustration. Caleb, I'm with you, brother. I agree. I see what you're saying for sure. Brian Fleming checks in, John. He said, Brian, appreciate it, man. He says, so who's this year's Robert Quinn or Shaq Leonard that takes our other 3rd round pick? The desperation,
Shaq Leonard's another guy.
Pick Band-Aid from Howie Napoleon.
I
ego is bruised. Brian coming in swinging, John.
I had to take Jody off the bridge with Shaq Leonard. Oh, they got to get Shaq Leonard. They got to get Shaq Leonard. The Cowboys are looking at Shaq Leonard. That was the key to it all.
Yeah.
You're not going to get anything of relevance at the trade deadline. There's a couple ones, Devontae Adams. It usually has to do with a player that's unhappy in his situation. You're not getting Max Crosby. the NFL's not, even though it's gotten a little bit better and you have younger GMs more willing to make moves, there's no big sell-offs. There's no NBA or Major League Baseball mentality. Yeah, I mean, you're as far as talent, your lot is cast for the most part. Can you add a contributor? Yeah, you hopefully. Back in the day, Jannard Avery, Golden Tate won you a playoff game. You know, whatever how he's done at the trade deadline. Hopefully, they're a little bit better than Robert Quinn, who was washed. But you're not getting an All-Pro at the trade deadline.
No,
unless
Howie
it's
threw a lot of
Devontae
darts this
Adams.
week, John. And
What's that?
Howie did throw a lot of darts this offseason on defense, and it doesn't look like any of them have worked out to this point. But we will see how it plays out. Let's get to our commercial break. We got BLG in the green room. I can't wait to talk to BLG. He might have to talk me off the ledge. Mike Gill didn't, John. I gave him the thing, and he's like, oh, no, you're not overreacting at all. You're spot on. I'm like, oh, great. Thanks, Mike. So let me get to the commercial break. I'll talk to BLG. Before I do that, let me tell you all about BetUS, our great partner here on Birds 365. Check out that promo, everybody. Using that code YouTube150, you get a 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit up to $2,000. And then on your second and third deposit, you get up to 125%. So deposit less and bet with more. I'm taking the Birds over the Browns this week, but I don't feel too confident.
Sound like it.
I still got to do it, John. They're the Browns. They stink right now. So we'll see. Go to betus.com.pa, everybody. That's betus.com.pa. They have the fastest payouts in the industry, 24/7 customer support, and they'll even give you a custom account manager to take care of you. So go check out betus.com today and use that promo code. Back in 3 minutes, everybody, with BLG.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the Birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365, joined now by Brandon Lee Gouton of Bleeding Green Nation. BLG, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, man?
How's it going, guys?
Good to see you, BLG. Let's start with the class of 2021. There are two left. Coaching class of 2021. Robert Saleh out. Did that change BLG's vision of Nick Sirianni's coaching mortality at all?
I don't think so. No, because I still think that when you look at the Eagles, track record over a long time, especially under Jeffrey Lurie and with Chip Kelly being the exception here, and that being in what week?
One game.
Yeah, the penultimate week of the season leading up to that final game. I almost just can't believe there would be a coaching change unless it was so egregiously bad or until later in the year.
BLG, if they lose this game to the Browns, and I know I'm playing hypothetical right now, but here's why I think it's worth a thought, because expectations matter, right? We talk about them all the time, and sometimes they're too big. John talks about it all the time that, this team crumbled under expectations last year when they're 10-1 and like the most unhappy team in the world, right? I think the owner has big expectations. You're spending this type of money on offense. I think he's looking at this team right now like they got to get this on track. And why I say it's possible early, if he's doesn't have the thought, it's not going to happen. But if he's even considering it, wouldn't he do it early to try and salvage the season versus if they lose 3 of the next 4? It's like, shoot, the season's over. I mean, if you fall to 2-3, you're still right in the mix in the NFC. Would it be, did the damn door open with the Jets? And is it even possible that Lurie would think to do it with Nick?
I mean, my problem with that is then why did you bring him back at all? If these first, whatever, 4, 5 games, 6 games, were going to be the difference maker, that should not have been the determining factor, whether he should stay or not. If can they get out to a hot start? Got out to a hot start last year, 10-1, and they collapsed down the stretch. It's just that shouldn't be the determining factor to me. Although I will say, to your point, they do lose to this Browns team. That would be very bad. There's no really good reason the Eagles should lose to this team from the standpoint. They're 8.5 point, 9 point favorites, depending where you look. Yeah. The Browns are coming off this will be their 3rd straight road game. Teams in that spot, typically it's a really tough spot for them. Meanwhile, the Eagles are coming off their bye. Eagles are getting healthier. There's just no reason on paper why the Eagles should lose this game. That doesn't mean they can't lose the game, but there's no good reason why they should lose the game.
Boy, you're right. And it would be ugly because of Deshaun Watson. I mean, everybody, no matter what Kevin Stefanski says, he doesn't want to play that guy, but he has to play that guy. Mm-hmm. It would be a catastrophic loss. I would go down that route, and I would still say if they do lose, Nick Sirianni's still not getting fired, BLG, because I have confidence that Jeffrey Lurie is a much more measured thinker than some other NFL owners. I just don't think he would go down that route. And my last question about the coaching is, who's next? Nobody ever thinks about who's next. You're going to elevate Kellen Moore?
They did interview him to be their head coach before they hired.
That's what Zander brought up. And I'm
Nick
like,
Sirianni.
That could be good and bad. Now, obviously, he's here. It probably wasn't bad, but I do think when people say so-and-so interviewed so-and-so, they automatically means they liked them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you interview somebody and go, well, that guy's not the answer. Yeah. Let's move on. So it can be in the negative portion, but it's more of his performance here. So you have it's Nick Sirianni crowd versus Kellen Moore is doing the game planning. If Kellen Moore is doing the game plan, and I'm 99.5% sure he's doing the game plan, I'll leave that little window open. They haven't scored in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. They've had, I believe, 12 yards on 13 plays or 13 yards on 12 plays in their first drives the entire season. It hadn't been good.
It's been a big problem.
It's got to get better, but right now, why would you want Kellen Moore being elevated to this?
Yeah, and it's dating back to last year too. It's the final 2 games from last season too. They also did not score in the first quarter, so I think Kellen Moore is part of the problem when we look at that. But I also think that especially with more of the opening script, like the approach to opening the game, to me, in my kind of thought process about it, like that's something that the CEO, head coach should have a role in. Like, how are we conceptually going to go into this game and start the game and attack the opponent? Like, that seems like a big picture kind of concept there. Obviously, you have to nail the play calling within that. And the players take their own responsibility as well. But I think, we're going to use that term CEO, head coach. And that's also a time where he has to, if he isn't involved with that already, he has to then identify that as a big problem and kind of address that and figure out, okay, what are the answers at this problem point for us? So, I think Nick Sirianni has to ultimately be the one who helps find the solutions for that, even if Kellen Moore is part of the problem.
But I'm speaking post Nick Sirianni. So I'm trying to get to the core of why people are so confident in Kellen Moore. Now that Devin White is gone, I'm diving deep into this, Brandon, because it's so interesting to me. The guy's done nothing. The quarterback has regressed, if anything. Why is everybody so sure about Kellen Moore, who, by the way, this is his third job in 3 years? He's closer to being irrelevant in the NFL than being a head coach in the NFL. Yet, I think everybody would be fine if he was the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. It's strange to me.
It's like the backup quarterback is the most popular player in the city, right? It's like that kind of thing where, everyone is so against the one guy that, by contrast, the guy behind him is by default much more better or offers more hope. I think if the Eagles did make a move, which I don't expect them to, at least anytime too soon, barring, if they get blown out by the Browns, okay, maybe we're talking about that. But barring something like that, I think it's not going to happen. But I do think Kellen Moore would be from the standpoint of, from what the Eagles have, which, there aren't a lot of options. I don't think they're going to give Vic Fangio that job. I don't even know if Vic Fangio wants that at this point in his career. I would think they would be interested in evaluating Kellen Moore in that capacity, while likely knowing they would, be having a head coach search that leads to them hiring someone else next year.
BLJ, this is highlighting a bigger look at this defense this year. John prepared me very well for Devin White being released. He told me all season, don't get my hopes up on the player. But now I'm looking at the full picture, BLJ, and we talk about the talent on this offensive side of the ball. It's arguably the most talented offense the Philadelphia Eagles have ever had in franchise history. And now I'm looking at the defensive side of the ball, which has been very underwhelming, and they're not plagued with injury, so I don't want to hear that excuse. I'm looking at 2 first-round draft picks that are completely underperforming, Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith. I'm looking at a $17 million edge rusher that's been a nothing burger in Bryce Huff. Nakobe Dean is meh. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is bottom of the league right now in touchdowns given up and missed tackles. Howie missed on every dart on defense right now. I mean, are we going to squander one of the best offenses we've ever had because Howie just didn't do one thing right on defense? At what point does he come into the crosshair?
I'm going to throw Zach Bond at you.
Zach Bond's a win, but I mean, shit.
I would say that's more of a Vic thing, though, in that case, just because, I know Howie signed him, but, I think Vic's role and vision for Zach Bond was, true. I mean, I give Howie some credit, but I think Vic Fangio deserves especially amount of credit in that one, where it seemed to me, I would argue, the Zach Bond signing was more of a Vic signing, whereas the Devin White signing was probably more of a Howie signing than a coaching staff kind of signing, because it's this guy is a former number 5 pick, overall pick, athletic, all that. That seems to me someone the front office wants to take a chance on, whereas the coaching staff is maybe not as convinced on that, and how he's been erratic and maybe not be able to trust him. And clearly, I think that kind of ultimately played out with Devin White. So he did re-sign Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham's looking good, so I guess there's that too. But no, and to the larger point, I think a lot of the failings here on defense, I mean, you can't just say it's the coordinator. I'm not saying the coordinator isn't part of the problem. It all goes together, but I mean, I just don't even know, that the Eagles really have the defensive personnel to be this great unit. And a lot of that stems from, and really to a bigger point, I mean, Saquon Barkley signing aside, which has been a home run and has, I think, been even way better than anyone really could have thought it to be. But that aside, Howie's offseason as a whole, just really not good enough.
Yeah, it doesn't look good in a snapshot. It is early, and I think from the Eagles' perspective, there's not a lot of panic because they played 3 games without A.J. Brown. We know this team's history. When that happens, it's not good. They should persevere better, but they can't. Lane Johnson, Devontae Smith added in Tampa. We know their history when Lane's not on the field. It's ugly. But Dan Orlovsky said something interesting to me, and I thought it was unfair to a certain extent. He said, nobody's progressing here, which I think it's fair to say a bunch of players are either regressing or disappointing in the fact that maybe the trajectory isn't as high as we expected. But there's still a bunch of guys who are progressing nicely. I would start with Reed Blankenship on defense. Quinion Mitchell's been tremendous early. Cam Jurgens, Jordan Mailata just keeps getting better and better. The offensive line, Jeff Stoutland's a big part of that, obviously. But those guys keep getting better and better. You think that's unfair when people say nobody's progressing?
I remember that being a big talking point at the end of the Doug Peterson era. And a big reason, I think, kind of why the Eagles went with Nick Sirianni and a very young coaching staff at the time. I think the focus was like on player development and trying to get these guys better. So I don't know how much of that is cyclical. I don't know how much of that might just be like, if you make the wrong personnel moves, it's kind of hard for some players to get better if the players just can't really play at all. It's not, to me, it's not like a blank slate. Everyone has a blank slate and they can just get better no matter what. Sometimes players can play or they can't. And it's not, the coaching staff can try to do the most they can. And I think obviously you want to see examples of that throughout. But it can't just be about literally, making every player better. A lot of it falls on the player. A lot of times when players improve, it's not during the course of the season, it's in the off season. They take their training more seriously and dedicate themselves to improving. So there's a lot of different factors, I feel like, that kind of go into that.
How about the quarterback, BLG? Has he regressed since he got his big contract?
I mean, the turnover thing is just, it's like not even interesting to talk about because it's just like very low hanging fruit and obvious, but it's true. It's like you can't move beyond that.
Yeah, the quarterback's the most important player on every football team. That's how it goes.
That's why you pay him $250 million. And okay, the Eagles don't have A.J. Brown. They don't have Lane Johnson. They don't have Devontae Smith for the last game. Those are big things, but it can't just be as simple as especially if we're just talking about A.J. alone. Well, they have a chance with A.J. and they don't without him. That's not good enough. That's not.
That is. And I love A.J. Brown. I think he is the best pure football player on the Eagles. I've said it for a while. You got to be better. He's a wide receiver. There's, they are hampered. Every wide receiver in this league is hampered by the fact that they need a vehicle to get them the football. So their dominance is curbed to a certain degree, whereas obviously a quarterback handles it all. An edge rusher can wreck a game. Those guys, Lane Johnson makes more sense because you see Fred Johnson. Lane gives up no pressures in 91 snaps. Fred's given up like 16 and 70 something. It's unbelievable the difference. A wide receiver, you've seen Kansas City without Tyreek Hill. They keep chugging along. They're a little bit different. Even Minnesota without Justin Jefferson last year. All of a sudden, here's Jordan Addison. There's something. There's some punch. The Eagles, it's pathetic when AJ's not on the field. It's bizarre to me, BLG. Explain it to me.
Well, I was just going to say, the injury excuses are so lame for a team that won the Super Bowl, missing so many key players that year when they went to the
you, BLG.
Obviously, there's going to be some kind of drop off. No one is saying they need to be at the same level the whole time, and the player doesn't matter. AJ Brown, as you said, is fantastic. But it's just the excuse can't be to the point again to where it's just like they don't have a prayer. They should without AJ Brown, the Eagles should have less of a chance. Sure, that is the testament to him being good. They're not going to be as successful without him. It doesn't mean they have to be entirely hopeless. They don't have a shot, and it's been that extreme. It feels like here, and it's just not good enough. And getting back to Hurts, I mean, he leads the NFL in turnover-worthy plays with 11 so far this season. The turnover-worthy play percentage at 6.7, according to PFF. It's the highest in the league among quarterbacks with at least 100 dropbacks. Like, it's just too many. And like you ask, okay, how could the Eagles lose to this Browns team that, again, there's big favorites over? That's exactly it. If you turn the ball over, like that's exactly how you lose that kind of game.
Yeah. And those turnover-worthy plays are why his PFF grade is so poor. They played such and they should.
It should be poor. He's looked awful. I mean, anybody that's real, he has not looked good this year. And I have a problem with that. I understand when AJ Brown and Devontae Smith aren't out there, you're not going to be as good. BLJ, I thought you stated it perfectly. Yeah, they're great players. Your chances of winning are going to go down. But I mean, I watched this city cry and whine about Carson Wentz. The dude was throwing to Jalen Reagor and Travis Fulgham. Jalen Hurts has better targets than we traded a 3rd-round pick for Jahan Dotson. I mean, he's not elevating anybody right now at the quarterback position. I think it's the biggest problem with this football team just because he's the quarterback. I mean, you can't get around that.
That's why you pay him, like, again, $250 million. Like it's not, it can't just be like, well, it's everyone's fault. Yeah, it is, but guess what? Like, you're paying him with that much money, that much part of your salary cap, with the idea that he can make up, at least in theory, for some of these shortcomings.
Right.
Like, that's what these top quarterbacks need to do at some point. Maybe they can't do it over the course of an entire season, but like at the very least, you want them to do it for a couple games. And that has not been the case here. I don't think Hurts has played to that kind of level, and that's what they need from him.
So since we went on the Jalen tangent and we were talking about coaching, let's put it together. A lot of people bring up the excuse of the play callers and continuity and go back to his days at Alabama. You know the list, starting with Lane Kiffin, just about a different name every year. The one exception being Shane Steichen, and that's his best year. Yet you have this other group that always wants to fire the coordinators when things don't go well. So if you go back to the Doug Peterson era, it was Mike Rowe, it was Press Taylor, it was whomever. Now it's Brian Johnson, and you have no continuity. Now, Howie spoke about this, if you remember, in training camp, and he was like, hey, man, that's the NFL. You lose coaches if you're good, and you lose coaches if you're bad. So everybody goes through this kind of turnover. Is the only way to stop it to get a head coach who calls the plays?
I was just looking up. Yeah, like I forget this stat, but I remember seeing it earlier this offseason. You look at like the longest tenured offensive coordinator. I'm pretty sure it's like from 2022 at this point. Like these offensive coordinators are just not in those roles for very long. So yeah, I don't want to hear that as an excuse. Like that's just not the expectation that you can reasonably think that's going to happen. You're just going to have this offensive coordinator here who's going to be here forever, unless you, I guess, kind of get like lucky somehow and almost find like the Jim Schwartz or the Vic Fangio like version offensive coordinator.
You got to get Tom Moore. Can you get Tom Moore back? Maybe maybe.
Yeah. But that's such the exception. That's first of all, it doesn't happen. Second of all, if it did, it'd be such a rare exception. That can't be the expectation. Like that coaching stability is just going to exist. That's not the name of the game. So yeah, that part of it has never interested me in terms of like figuring out like, or last year I talked about like the Eagles should have lamenting the Shane Steichen loss. Like they couldn't have kept him. I don't know what people really want to happen. Like it's just. It's unfortunate from the standpoint of, in a perfect world, you'd like to be able to keep them, but you can't. That's the name of the game, and you have to then figure out how to work around that.
BLG, Eagles got the Browns this week. It's when you look at it from the outside, it's like this is a get-right game, right? I mean, you look at it and you're like, shit, this team is the only offense in the NFL that hasn't had a 300-yard game. Deshaun Watson looks like a bottom 5 quarterback, let alone a $53 million fully guaranteed quarterback. Here's where I'm wondering on it now, though. Will the pressure creep into the locker room? Because if you think about it, It's not just one of those games where it's a win or lose and move on to the next one. The sky's already fallen a little bit. If you lose to the Browns, the sky's really going to fall. I wonder if that's going to have any impact on inside the locker room where it's like any given Sunday you can lose. But if we lose to this team, it's going to be that bad. Will that creep in and affect this team in the way they prepare?
Yeah, with Deshaun Watson, I mean, like, I think it's gotten to a point where, like, he might be a better person than a player. Like, that's how bad he's been as a player. Like, but it's true because he's
all
been,
right. Clip that. I love that.
That's how bad he's been. Like, he's been horrendous out there. Like, he's unplayable, historically so. Should not be playing at all. Like John said, I don't think Stefanski wants to play him. I don't think that coaching staff wants to, but they have to. I think I've never been a big Jameis Winston guy, but I find it hard to believe that he can't be better than what Deshaun Watson looks like right now. So, yeah, this team, like, they shouldn't have much of a chance with how bad a quarterback looks like on that side of the ball. For them, obviously, their defense is a little bit better. They have a coach over there who kind of knows what he's doing with that unit. But yeah, so to the Eagles' point of this, I mean, like, there hasn't been more of like a get right opportunity for them in a bit here. That, again, everything on paper going into this matchup is working in their favor. That does not mean it will happen, but like, this is the time. This is the situation. If there was going to be a game where for the first time in basically almost an entire year, the Eagles haven't won by multiple scores, more than 8 points, multiple possessions since the Dolphins game in October last year, the Kelly Green debut game. Like, this should be the game. It's literally the expectation almost by the betting line. So pressure, whatever, like this, it doesn't matter. Like, they have every reason they should win this game. And if they don't, it's a big problem.
By the way, Mike Gill told me this, BLG, and I don't know if you delved into Cleveland yet, but they are third in the league in blitz percentage with Jim Schwartz. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. What the hell is going on? He's like the pod guy. He's like Donald Sutherland. Third in the league in blitz percentage. That I don't know what's going on in Cleveland, but if they can't beat this team, boy, yeah, it could get ugly pretty quickly. Now, I'm going to turn this positive. They're going to be fine. The next 4 games are, yeah, again, this is not college football where you have gimmies on your schedule. This is the NFL, but they're in good position. Getting back AJ Brown, getting back Lane Johnson, getting back Devontae Smith. I think they are going to score 30 points a game, and people are going to breathe a sigh of relief. I don't know what it means long term. If they're a real contender versus just beating up on some lesser competition. But I think things are going to be fine. Where are you with this team coming out of the bye?
My problem with that is just, we thought like they would, pick up some of those wins at the end of last season, after that tough gauntlet stretch. It looked like, okay, they should be able to beat the Giants. And they did, although, not as easily as they probably should have.
Well, they did lose one, didn't they? To Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets.
Yeah, well, AJ got hurt.
And they weren't like, fully going all out. They did play the starters, but the game didn't matter. So they waved the light flag at halftime. Although if it did matter, they still could have lost that. Yeah. And then
probably would have, let's be real.
Yeah. They lost to the Cardinals, obviously, as well, as we all remember. So I have a tough time just saying like the schedule is easy. They can definitely do it. But I think, John, you're correct to like frame it in this next 4-game window here. Like, it is a real opportunity to, let's just say, like, if you go 3-1, not even a perfect 4-0, 3-1, you get to 5-3, going into that Cowboys game in Dallas, a really big one. And if you beat them, like, hey, you're 6-3, you're feeling good. You're feeling like, okay, this season could be on track. We have hope here for the second half. And if anything short of that, then I think it's going kind of a rough way here. But yeah, it is a big opportunity here. I do think the Bengals in this stretch are like that Bengals team is better than a 1-4.
Oh yeah,
way
I
better.
agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
And that game's in Cincy too. I think that's going to be a tough game for them. But
shows you why
I
you need
said.
a good defense, though. BLG Joe Burrow threw for 5 touchdowns last week and lost the game.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, I said 3-1. So, let's say that's the one loss. Let's say you beat the Giants here. You beat the Browns this weekend. Who else do they have in this stretch here?
Jacksonville.
You beat the Jags. Like, I think that's within reach. Sure.
And by the way, I think November 14th, short week, I am concerned about Jaden Daniels. I think Washington is going to be a problem. I don't think people know what to do with him defensively from a defensive perspective. I think the Commanders are the biggest threat in the NFC East. Agree or disagree?
Big time agree. Jaden Daniels just does not look like a rookie to me. And I felt that way even watching that game they had against the Giants where I don't even think they scored a touchdown, or maybe it was the Giants who didn't. In any case, no, it was them. Yeah, they didn't score a touchdown, I don't think, the Commanders. But he just looks so poised, and we've really seen that carry over. Now, you look at some of like the metrics on him and that Washington offense as a whole. They've been so good that it's hard to like really believe they're going to be that level good.
They've been what people expect the Eagles offense to be over the last. Over the last.
Daniels delivering the ball from the pocket on time and on target makes a big difference for an offense.
It's a big deal. So I think they're not going to be quite this good, but I do think they're a real problem for the Eagles and really every team in the NFC East and the NFC as a whole right now.
BLG, before I let you go, appreciate you being here today. This is a great super chat to your point, BLG. To BLG's point, Massage Watson has settled more lawsuits than he has touchdowns for the Browns. This is a real stat.
That's true. That's true. 23-19, I believe.
And that's not obviously no one is saying he's a great person.
No.
That's not.
That's a great line. Don't back off it. That is a
Yeah.
great line. Do not shy away from it, BLG. Own it. Tremendous. Got a great laugh. I love it. Great line.
BLG, thanks, man. Appreciate you being here, brother. See ya.
Thanks, bud.
Good stuff from BLG, John. Great stuff. From BLG.
That's a great line. I don't care if people get
that was a great line.
Get a sense of humor if you're upset by that.
Yeah, come on. No, I don't think anybody's upset by it, though. John, I do got to run through a couple super chats. We got about 6 or 7 minutes left on the show. Before I get to the super chats, just your final thoughts on the day here, John. Mike Gill brought some great insight. BLG brought some great insight. Browns coming up. Devin White released. Your final thoughts on this Wednesday as we prep to get back to practice.
Devin White's a non-story, wasn't involved. I think the story is that people thought he was going to be involved, which I don't understand. The perception did not match the reality. Now the reality. I would say turn the page. That's where it is. He wasn't going to play even if somebody got hurt. So it would have been Ben or Jeremiah Trotter Jr. In game, it might have been Oren Burks because he's got that experience. But yeah, very weird situation to me. And then Browns. I mean, yeah, everything's set up for you. I mean, one of the things I do think, the Eagles are focused on, one game at a time. That's how you have to handle the NFL. They're not thinking about 4 weeks down the road or 5 weeks down the road or 6 weeks down the road. So it's a good chance to get a little bit healthy and change the narrative against a team. You think the Eagles are struggling? Look at the Cleveland Browns. I think somebody called it the worst situation in sports, and I can't disagree with them because they don't want to play the quarterback and they have to. And that's a bad situation to be in.
John Stroll through a couple super chats. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. Got a great crowd in here on Birds 365. You guys have been showing out, so we appreciate you. I told you guys yesterday we've had the biggest numbers on Birds 365 ever, so I can't thank you all enough for the support. Make sure you guys hit that like button if you're enjoying the show. Let's get to James Carver. James with a big super chat. James, appreciate it, brother. He says, how can people continue to trash on Jordan Davis and overlook Jalen Carter when both are having to overcome constant doubles and 4 or 5 man fronts because the edges, especially Huff as a 1, makes it so both doubled because a single tight end is making a D-line a 3 or 4 respectively. That's a good point, John.
Well, I think I don't think anybody's trashing Jalen Carter other than the obvious stuff, the consistency, um, the the ability to play at the same level each and every week. I don't think he's there maturity wise. Other than that, I mean, the upside to Jalen Carter remains obvious, I think, to most people. With Jordan Davis, uh, James and I have talked about that a lot back and forth. I mean, people don't understand his role. But that being said, he hasn't played as well as he typically does this season. And I think it's fair to say it's been a bit of a disappointment um, for Jordan Davis, more so than Jalen Carter. I
Get to our
think.
next super chat. Good answer there, James. Hopefully that was a good.
Even
answer.
with the context of they have different roles.
Yeah,
which is
well,
what
I agree. I do think, to James's point, though, if these edge rushers were a little bit better, maybe it would change a lot of the perspective on the defensive line. Caleb checks in. This was a follow up to his earlier super chats, but we were in the commercial break, I think, when he sent this. John, being committed to the run means if you have 5 carries for 9 yards, you still got to run. It's a commitment, not 2 bad plays and done with the best O-line running back in football. I think that's a fair
well,
point.
that's easy to say. And this, I don't, if you're down 21-0 and you're committed to the run, I guarantee most fans are screaming at the TV. What are you doing? Especially if you get 5 carries to 9 yards.
Yeah,
So
but
it's a
long game.
complimentary game.
You're right about that.
And if you're down 21-0 in the modern NFL, and by the way, again, it's not 1985. It's a different game. I don't like the game necessarily from an aesthetic standpoint. It's played differently. But if you're down 21-0 and you go 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and you have the patience to run the ball like that, Godspeed to you. But vast majority of people don't. And if you do that, you're probably going to lose the game. Whereas if you go about it like Green Bay a couple weeks ago when they were down 4 touchdowns, you get back in the game. Even at 28-0, you still have an opportunity to get back in a game. If you're down 28-0 and you're trying to prove a point and stay disciplined, you're not going to get back in that football game. Period. End of sentence.
Yeah, I hear you. I do think. I mean, look, it's a long game. Eagles did bounce back. I mean, here's Caleb. He just follows up with you because you're answering his super chat. Appreciate it, Caleb. By the way, man, I talked to Caleb on the post game show after the Bucks game, so it was good to put a face to a name with Caleb. He says, "Yes, you down 21 because you don't run 3 and out." He is right. I mean, John, we were down 3 and 1.
Well, it's a complimentary. You're also down because the defense can't stop any. It's a complimentary game. It's special teams. I bring up they took a false start on special teams when they're getting ready to punt the football. It's a complimentary game. The defense didn't perform. The offense didn't perform. But let's be honest. If you go 3 and out 3 consecutive times, yeah, the offense is going to be the headline in that complimentary default of ineptitude. I mean, 3 and outs to start a game. And Kellen Moore took took responsibility for it, as he should. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. And in that grouping of plays, you had an opportunity to make play running the ball. You had an opportunity to make play passing the ball. They didn't make any plays. So everybody is on the hook from Kellen Moore to the quarterback on down.
Let's get one more super chat from my main man, Jason 18, one of our legend members. Jason, appreciate it, brother. He says, what do you think will happen if we get embarrassed by the Browns this week? I'm not too high on us winning because how Washington beat them down. They did beat them down pretty good. I think it was like 34-13 or somewhere.
Yeah, and it was 34-6. It wasn't even that close. But I don't understand. He's not confident because of how Washington beat them down.
Washington's better, clearly.
Well,
I will say this too. The Washington team worked them, but Jim Schwartz did somewhat manage Jaden Daniels.
He actually slowed him down more.
Slowed down a little bit, right?
Week. Yeah.
Will he have the book out?
No, I think he means that. Yeah, and this was what I mentioned. Going into the New Orleans week when it was the opposite, and they're kind of it's tough to handle success, everybody's telling them how great they are, scoring 45 points a game.
Yeah. Well, there's his follow-up, John, Jason's. TB was blown out week before us, and then we got killed. I think that's what. Yep. So you're right. That's what he was going to.
So I get it to a standpoint, but again, their quarterback situation is so bad, and you got to take advantage of it if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's been a long sample. It's been a large sample size now with Deshaun Watson. Just doesn't have it coming off. And his Pro Bowls were legitimate. We talked about that with Devin White. Deshaun Watson was one of the best quarterbacks in football before all his legal issues. He is not the same guy. He sat out a year and then 11 games. That is a long time. And he has not been the same guy since that long layoff.
John, in Philadelphia Eagles, I'm sure you got to run because you're going down to the NovaCare complex. I'll let you get out of here. In Philadelphia Eagles fashion, will Deshaun Watson return to 2020 form this weekend?
He doesn't have that form, but it's gone. It's gone.
It's gone. I'm worried Jalen's 22 form is gone, John.
Could be. But he's as poorly as Jalen has played at times. He's not played Deshaun Watson poorly.
No, not even close. Yeah, got to be real.
Yeah. So
Deshaun Watson's been bad. No doubt. Great show today, Johnny Mac. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Appreciate all of our super chats. Caleb, thank you for your support today. James Carver, thank you for your support. Brian Fleming, Jason A-Team, Fleming again. So Brian Garner and James Carver, you guys are the best, man. Appreciate all the super chats. They go a long way in helping us, and all the people in the chat that didn't super or are not members. We appreciate you as well. John Nag, one more, John, real quick before I let you go. If Philly doesn't win decisively this week and blow out a Cleveland team that has clearly quit because of quarterback,
they don't have to blow them out. Don't get too up.
There are huge problems with this team.
They got to win the game.
That's what I said yesterday. You got to win the game. I'm not worried about the damn spread. Yeah. Win the game. Get back in the win column.
Yeah, I'm not worried about blowout. It's the NFL. Don't get caught up in blowout this, blowout that. Hopefully you play well. Hopefully they do blow them out, but get a win. Get a win.
No doubt. John, thank you for the super chat, man. Appreciate that. Johnny Mac, great show today. Everybody, as I mentioned already, thank you guys. Hit that like button on your way out. It really goes a long way in helping continue to grow the show. John, our biggest year ever so far on Birds 365. September was our biggest month ever on Birds 365. Go back to last year. We had all these shows, all these, a whole different looking network. We had our biggest month in September. So I can't thank everybody enough for the support of the channel. Johnny Mac, great show, man. I'll catch you tomorrow on Thursday's edition of Birds 365 with hopefully some intel you get today from being down at NovaCare.
Yeah, big day today. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, practice. So we'll have some stuff tomorrow.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Talk to you tomorrow, man. Thanks, everybody in the chat. Hit that like button on your way out. Catch you tomorrow, everyone.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.